Dear ladies and gentlemen, шановні пані та панове, liebe Damen und Herren, вітаю вас на відкритті проєкту.
Welcome at the inauguration of the Skills4Recovery project, Skilled Labor for Recovery of Ukraine, which is a project implemented by the GIZ. And right at the beginning, some house rules to potentially save our lives and ensure our safe operation. If we hear missile strike alert, notice we head straight to the underground shelter. We will be assisted to go there, and we will have a little break for that, but we might be able to continue working there without live streaming though. And we will resume our full-scale operation after the alert ends. Same goes about those watching us on the Facebook, YouTube, via Zoom. If you are hearing alert at your location, please go to a safe place. The working languages of this conference are Ukrainian and English. You have your headphones and you can select channel 1 for English, channel 2 for Ukrainian. I would thoroughly advise even those with good knowledge of both languages to listen to interpretation, giving the high-level interpretations provided by our skilled interpreters. And again, we are going to hear many speakers, and we are going to have panel discussion. You will have a chance to put questions to the speakers and hear their responses. Please meet Evgenia and Alexander. It's very important persons. They will be carrying microphones. And I strongly advise them to keep microphones in their hands, because those who take them to speak are reluctant to give them back. Now, the topic of today is really important. The House rules have been announced, and I think it's the right time to usher welcome speeches that will tune us up for our fruitful work today. I'd like to give the floor now to Dmytro Zavgorodny, Deputy Minister of Education and Science of Ukraine. Please. Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Glad to see many familiar faces from across the country. Thanks for coming out here, for being the part of the project. I'd like to start by thanking our partners, the German government, the European Union, the GIZ, everyone contributing to making the project happen. It is always a challenge for me to do a welcome speech rather than giving some specific answer to a specific question. But still, I'd like to use this opportunity to tell you that for me personally, the main area of project operation is of extreme importance, as it is also for our ministry. And there is a couple of reasons for that. First of all, we do believe in that. We presented it to the Prime Minister, the President of Ukraine. We presented the area of the project before the Cabinet. You know, our education has to play a much bigger role in terms of adult training, in terms of training for IDPs, for veterans, for those willing to reskill themselves, and not much has been done in this domain by the government, by the ministry so far, and we want to change it. Secondly, it's about cooperation with the Ministry of Economy. When I assumed the office and became the one in charge of vocational education and training, this type of cooperation became of strategic importance for us. collaborating with the Employment Service, with the Ministry of Economy is of paramount importance whenever we move towards making our education better fitting the demands from the labor market. I do hope that we will be able to do this by joint efforts. Thank you, Dmitry. I think you've made it very content-rich and very enthralling. But my first question, you said of familiar faces. Is it good or is it bad? On the one hand, you know people. On the other hand, there is a narrow circle of those who you know. Well, could be one of weak spots of any meeting when you see too many familiar faces. I think actually the project should have been much wider, much bigger, because if you are willing to introduce some changes of scale across the country, maybe this will not be enough. But if you are to build some systemic things to scale up them later on, it's always better to do that jointly with the people you know, the ones I've called familiar faces, because definitely these are the ones ready to work together as a team to reach for the result. Thank you indeed. We had Dmytro Zagorodny from the Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine, who logically brought us to the continuation. Please welcome Roman Poklonsky, Director of the Labor Employment Department at the Ministry of Economy of Ukraine. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to international partners of the project. Tatiana Berezhna, Deputy Minister of Economy, should be speaking here instead of me, but unfortunately, she's falling ill, so I have this honor of addressing you with this welcome speech. Ukraine is facing huge challenges, big humanitarian catastrophe caused by the war. We have no idea when this catastrophe ends and what the post-war labor market will look like. We addressed the ILO and some other organizations to come up with their forecast of our labor market development for upcoming periods, and the data resulting were quite different, but there are some common indicators that say that the market will grow, will develop, and for post-war recovery to happen, we will need skilled professionals. This project, thanks to our international partners, the German government, the GIZ, the European Commission, it will contribute to the future recovery of Ukraine, as it will also contribute to providing people with new skills and new job opportunities. Just to give you an example from the Schindler's List, one of my favorite movies, when more than 1,000 were saved by just one person, Oskar Schindler. You might remember the moment when those people were interviewed, and the answers were like, I'm a pianist. And Schindler would say, well, this is a good metal processor. I think this might tell us something. We will have to rethink our labor market, labor force requirements, skills required for the recovery of Ukraine. Those people who've stayed here, who will return to Ukraine after the war, will be able to better fit the Ukraine's economy after your project is completed. So big thanks from the Minister of Economy. Thank you, Roman. We had Roman Poklonsky from the Ministry of Economy of Ukraine. Now, Jens Adam, coordinator of the Sustainable Economic Development Cluster, GSZ, talking to us via GSZ, via Zoom.
Прошу.
Good morning. Dear Deputy Ministers, dear partners, colleagues and friends, supporting the economic recovery of Ukraine is a priority for the federal German government. On behalf of the German government, GSZ is supporting to stabilize the Ukrainian economy and build the foundation for a green digital economy in the heart of Europe with a number of projects, among them EU for Business. I'm just muting myself. I feel delighted to be part of the kick-off event for the new project Skills4Recovery, which is financed by the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development of Germany. The project, as such, will support select training providers to train the construction workers, drivers and mechanics as examples, who are required to rebuild Ukraine and its economy. Looking back at our cooperation regarding developed skills workers, since 2017, GSZ has been supporting vocational education and training in Ukraine and had some major achievements, like the following. We have supported more than 300 vocational schools in Ukraine in maintaining their educational programs despite the war. They have received generators, IT equipment, and textbooks for this purpose. We have provided training and further education for over 5,400 individuals, enabling them to actively shape their futures and participate in the reconstruction efforts. This support has been especially beneficial for internally displaced persons, IDP, who had to establish new homes after fleeing their homes. I would like to thank the Ministry of Education and Science and the Ministry of Economy for successful inception phase of this project and wish all the best for the start of the implementation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jens Adam, Німецьке товариство міжнародного співробітництва.
Jens Adam from the GSZ was with us, and it's time to present the project itself, the Skills4Recovery 1. Please welcome two people of great importance for the project itself. Welcome Mihail Paula, Project Director, and Oleksiy Oleksiuk, Project Advisor. Please, one by one or both together.
I think we are always delighted to be part of this technical community. I think we are roughly 150 people across the country moving the vocational education and training reform ahead. Today, we would like to present you the new project, Skills4Recovery. And before Oleksiy is getting into the details, I would like to take you on a time travel, how everything started. This was in December 2022. We should see the Director of Vocational Education and Training, Irina Shumik, discussing intensively how Skills4Recovery should look like. We also had with us the representatives of NQA, of the Ministry of Economy, of the State Employment Service, and even of the region of Rivne, together with us in Berlin. I still remember these were hard times, particularly for Kiev. There were daily attacks in these days. The city was dark at night, a lot of blackouts. And I still remember that Irina was forced to go by feet down 14 floors to reach her taxi and to go to Berlin. These were the time when we made a strategical decision that the next vocational education and training program should look on the topic of skills for recovery. This became the basis for our offer to the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development. And on 9th of July, the ministry gave us the commission. And this was the starting point for the shortest inception period I have ever witnessed. I'm honest to you, and I would like to thank the team of Ms. Bereshna and Mitro Zagorodny that in 2.5 months we decided on priority sectors, 14 qualifications which will be supported by the project, 6 focus regions, and even the list of pilot schools, of 20 pilot schools is ready. And with this event, we are ready to go. And once more, thank you to both ministries to make this possible. In The last days, I had the opportunity to travel around in Ukraine, and vocational education and training is always about parents, teachers, young people, adults who need to be retrained. But I think we need to acknowledge that Ukraine is in a different situation. And during the roundtable in Vinnytsia, I met Vasily in the yellow shirt. He's a director of the retail company Avrora, with a lot of different retail stores across the country. He is currently facing one challenge. Male staff, particularly from the warehouses, is mobilized, is not able to come to work, and women are taking over these jobs. He's changing the procedures inside the company. Less weight, but also he needs to retrain his female staff to take over these tasks. And this is a huge challenge for the organization, and he's looking up to partner with vocational education and training providers. The next person, which I also met in Vinnytsia, is Anna. And Anna is the owner of Perfetto. It's a company to produce cakes and ice cream, and she's doing a huge franchise. She had the destiny to resettle her company 2 times. She established it in Crimea, moved away from Crimea to Kherson, and moved last year away from Kherson to Vinnytsia. And she's never losing the hope, planning to further expand her company, and she's looking forward also to partner with someone to train her future staff. She is open even to train young people. In Poltava, I met another person. Her name is Katarina. She's currently the acting mayor of Poltava. She worked on the zero frontline in Bakhmut as a paramedic for 1 year. And with this experience, she's currently a strong advocate for the integration of ex-combatants. And I have never seen in my life somebody that passionately speaking about vocational education and training. She says it's a pathway for ex-combatants to retrain and to find a working place and to reintegrate into society. I think these 3 people are showing us a little bit how the environment, our project, and also how the reform is conducted is changing in Ukraine. We need to consider these new needs. Overall, our project will be then implemented till the end of 2026 and needs to consider these points. Just a few basic facts about Ukraine. And I think you are all familiar. Last year there was this huge economic shock. The GDP went down by 30%. But Roman already mentioned there's a stabilization also inside there. And there are a few recovery sectors already growing again. The labor market is still not looking good. But the challenge in the future will be that there will be less and less available people in the labor market, because Ukraine is facing serious demographic challenges. Ukraine has an aging society. Ukraine has refugees in Europe, more than 7 million. You have 6 million displaced inside the country. And of course, there are more and more vulnerable groups inside the country, like ex-combatants and others. I think this background is really important to understand how Skills4Recovery was structured. Just before I hand over to Alexei, I would like to give a little bit of a few facts about the project. So we are financed by the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development. Our objective is to support both ministries in providing a stronger basis to train the skilled workforce for the recovery process. Our budget is 10 million euro, and we will implement the project till June 2026. I think 3 core interventions we are planning, and you already recognized that the retraining of adults will become really a focus of our project, and we would work there particularly to equip adults with the skills and knowledge required so that they can contribute to the recovery process. The second point is, of course, there are more and more vulnerable groups. They are the weak ones in society. How to activate them for the labor market so that they can also contribute to the recovery process. I think what we should never neglect and ignore is that there are still a lot of young people in this country for whom vocational education and training is a promising career pathway. And we would also work on this topic. So I think we need to bridge a little bit the topic of how we can support adults, vulnerable groups, but still young people.
Шановні колеги, дозвольте мені перехватити ініціативу і продовжити презентацію.
Please allow me to take up this initiative and continue the presentation of our project. I will try to explain more how the implementation is designed, which will allow you to join the implementation of major goals of our project. As Mr. Mikhail Paolo had described, the project is focused on some most important aspects, but it also will allow us to scale up the impact of the project and extrapolate it over the entire territory of Ukraine. As it was mentioned, the war has changed society and labor market in all the regions of Ukraine. So we have to address these changes in first turn. On the other hand, we have inherited something from the past, the situation from the pre-war period. That's why the project comprises several components. That is why one of the components is to strengthen the institutional framework for the labor market for vocational training to allow the organizations to work with the target audience. The second project component is aimed at development of the training and educational programs. And having developed the vocational training and retraining institutionally, having developed the curricula and programs, we have to design the resource spending properly and to tailor up the labor force for the labor market demand. And eventually, the whole-up architecture of the project is crowned with the fourth component. These are the cases, the most successful cases, analysis of those cases, sharing the experience and strengthening cooperation and networking in the area at all the levels. Just a moment. So based on the project architecture, which I've just described, and which was developed in cooperation with our partners, I would like to thank once again to all our partners. So having designed this architecture, we continue to work in the same direction. Thus, we have set the priority sectors for the development of Ukrainian educational sector. First of all, reconstruction and recovery and rebuilding of Ukraine. Thus will be reconstruction. This second will be, of course, agricultural sector, which is top priority for Ukraine. The fourth sector will be the services sector, because we expect the need and demand in retraining and adaptation for vulnerable groups of population. Of course, we do not have much time for a long-term process. That's why with our partners we have chosen 6 regions for the project implementation, which cover up the whole territory of Ukraine, that is from the western Ukraine, from central Ukraine, from eastern Ukraine. And each of those parts are in different situation. The labor force, the companies, etc. And together with our partners, we tried to make a forecast, a prediction, which specialists will be mostly demanded in each region. Of course, current uncertainty in Ukraine does not allow to predict very precisely. Nevertheless, we tried to forecast the top priority and most demanded specifications, keeping in mind the changes which we expect to happen in this country. So the first top priority will be qualifications for the construction and recovery sectors. This second will be specializations and specialities for transport and logistics. There's 14 qualifications. They also consider the future Euro integration of Ukraine and the innovations and new technologies that will be needed. And despite the fact that you can simply borrow or buy technologies from other countries, but you cannot buy or borrow labor force to work with these new technologies and innovations, and you have to train this labor force. That's why Ukrainian movement towards European Union would require strengthening the requirements to the labor force in terms of its it to be more environmental friendly, more qualified, more efficient, etc. You've already understood that GIZ started to work on this project from the very beginning of full-scale invasion. From that moment when it became clear that Ukraine would change. And having explained you the overall logic of the project architecture, that is forecasting the future development of the market, the focus on the priority occupations, orientation, close orientation to the labor market, etc. On this slide, you see specific measures which were designed for the implementation of those targets. That is, we're going not to measure the number of events held by the project, but the number of people who will be trained and retrained in the centers, in the vocational training centers. And we believe that this approach will allow us to strengthen connection between the training and retraining centers and labor market, and will simplify for people, will facilitate smooth transition of labor force from one sector to another. And another important aspect is support from our partners, strategic support from our partners. Any education is about the future, and in our first block, we are going to respond to the challenges existent in this country, matching the demand in the labor market in new qualifications, and also the requests from combatants, from ex-combatants, and education of the adults. As of now, you can see two blocks, two components. Of course, some others may be added. Our experience of work in this country on the current circumstances and our experience of project implementation suggests that today we have to create preconditions for further development, new development of the vocational training. The second, what we have learned is that development of a country is about development of its people. And I encourage you to join the project work and to join our activities as much as possible to create preconditions for our future victory. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your presentations. You can take your seats. As it was mentioned, the project had no much time for large-scale research, but I hope that the project will have many opportunities for scaling up, for development of qualifications. We have heard about 4 components of the project from Mr. Paul and Mr. Oleksiuk, and those 4 components are like those 4 main nature powers, nature forces which exist in nature. And now we are going to have a panel discussion where we will discuss the following questions. Why the skill provision for recovery is so important now under the war? What are top 3 urgent steps needed for training skilled labor force? How would you like to activate vulnerable groups for the recovery processes? It's not my role as a moderator to interfere in the agenda, but as to the third item, I would suggest a slightly corrected formulation. Not how would you like, but how you think it is possible to activate. That is not a conditional mode, but actually the affirmative mode that we have to do it. Do we need the seventh armchair? Well, in this case, I will remain here and will keep moving around, which will create some difficulties for Ruslan. Okay, now the fourth armchair is added, and this is another example how the situation has been changing rapidly all this time. So, to discuss the announced topic, we will have almost the whole hour. At the end of the session, I will dedicate 15 minutes for Q&A session and for the comments from the audience. I'm happy to invite Mr. Roman Poklonsky, Director of the Sector of Employment from the Ministry of Economy, Ms. Irina Shumik, Head of VET Directorate, Ministry of Education and Science, Ms. Hanna Resnick, Deputy Head from NQA, Mr. Denis Alenik, Deputy Head from State Employment Center, Mr. Ivan Verbitsky, Director, NGO CEDOS, and Ms. Natalia Zaretska, Head of NGO Still Women. Okay, I have no armchair here. I will take a chair over there. Okay. Each of you, as a panelist, will be given 5 minutes for the introductory speech and 30 seconds prior to the end of your time slot, I will warn you. And before doing that, I suggest you to take just 30 seconds to answer my questions. In Ukrainian, it says the beginning of the project, while in English, this says kick off the project. That is the sharp launch of something. So what has to be attacked, so to say, what has to be kicked with the project to correspond to the name. I would like to kick the data first, that is to address the data and to in order to understand whether we will implement the project successfully or not. I would like to challenge the old approach, old traditional or conventional approach in our educational institutions, and the phrase we had been doing like that for ages, and to introduce changes. Thank you. I believe we should challenge communication because all the problems are due to the bad communication. Everybody is quite familiar with the indifference at the administrative level. We have to change that. We have to consolidate our efforts to get the result which we want to achieve. I believe we have to change our approach, to introduce new technologies, and to achieve the results. Okay, we have kicked off the beginning, and now let us one by one make our introductory speeches. Roman Poklonsky. Let us start with the discussion of the first question: why is the skill provision for recovery so important now under the war? In my opinion, that is not very complicated. You may recollect the story When in a jungle the sun rises, the a lion starts to move and an antelope starts to move. The idea is that irrespective who you are in a jungle, when the sun rises, you have to start move quickly, and this suggests that irrespective of the outside conditions, we have to move rapidly and to do something. We expect that the post-war labor market will grow and will require new labor force. And that labor force will need to meet the requirements of the labor market and qualifications. And people with the most demanded qualifications will be able to take decent positions in the labor market. In order to allow people to get these decent positions, we have to offer requalification to these people. Our task is not just to rescue people who are under difficult life conditions, but also rescue this country, and we can combine these two targets together.
Among the priority measures to quickly retrain skilled workers is about micro qualifications and rethinking qualifications. I still have 5 minutes. Next, we will have to create qualification upgrade centers, and the work in this regard will be carried out by the Minister of Economy, and we will ask the Minister of Education and Science and the National Qualifications Agency to assist us in that. We will be reviewing the system, updating it, digitizing the whole of it, including the stock taking. No more details at the moment, unfortunately, but the plans are there. And the third matter, this third variant, how to better support the vulnerable group to make them participate better in the recovery process. Let me give you names of some programs that we already have, and we will further expand them. So we have the Army of Recovery. This is not a legislative, legal language, but this is rather about inviting and employing those unemployed to work on request of oblast level military administration. And they are working also to create defense lines and to upkeep the cities. Next, we have a program that allows micro grants, 250,000 hryvnias capped, to support employment, and we have about 4,000 of such micro grants for the total about 1 billion hryvnias already issued. About a fortnight ago, the cabinet issued a resolution to help the employers with outfitting workplaces for disabled individuals. That is, the employer is willing to employ someone with disability will be able to receive support from the government to outfit job places for such individuals to make them perform better. Thank you, Roman. So Mr. Poklonsky just outlined, not just outlined the overall prospects, but also provided some examples, compelling others to follow the suit. Irina Shumik, your 5 minutes. Thank you. I recall a situation about 7 years ago when I worked at the education department in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. I do remember when we tried to talk to businesses, asking them to have a joint look of our programs, to hear from that what fails to meet their expectations. And do remember people telling us, we are fine, it's okay, we have enough personnel, we have enough stuff, nothing to change. From the current perspective, I'm sure that, yes, we will have to do forecasts, and we have to be able to do it every time. Not to say that we can forecast correctly every time, but it does pay off, because coming back to my example from 7 years ago, 2 years later, one of those businesses addressed us to advise that they are left of the staff, nearly all of them, with advent of the war, left for abroad, and the company is in dire need of employment. So it's really a problem for us, because we're living through the war in martial law period, and we are living through circumstances not a single country in modern Europe has lived through. But the positive of it, as Dmitro has mentioned, is that we do not stop, we move on with it, and even in these challenges, circumstances, we try to forecast what might or should happen later on. Some of the forecast results are quite clear and obvious, because we'll have to recover, rebuild our country, which is what we've started doing already. Next, we'll have to think about recovering the economy, making it breathe again, regarding specific sectors to be tackled first, and it's rather a question for the Ministry of Economy. But again, it's about correctly forecasting what has to be done. And I think the idea of the project is to provide support to Ukraine, to some selected oblasts of it, to see that the country received just the right skilled force it needs. And we need to be prepared, even if we miss with some of our forecasts. If we have at least 80% correct forecast, it still will make for a solid basis for Ukraine to reach the development and growth prospects it has charted. Otherwise, the whole of our existence and all our efforts will be in vain. From here, the value of the project for everyone. Irina, speaking of forecasts, and the weather one comes to my mind, these are mostly based either on some scientific calculations, I don't know, speed of wind and so on, or you may have some, just natural phenomena that some people try to use to predict weather. Do you have any natural phenomena you may judge your further actions upon? Let me tell you the story of my mom. She would always tell me that, well, the key natural phenomena, if the sun is up, it's time for everyone to get up and go to work. I think this is the key natural phenomenon to be followed. Okay, thank you. Hanna Reznik, Deputy Chair of the National Qualification Agency. It reminds me loosely the Ukrainian NAK as NAK Naftogaz, the National Oil and Gas Operator. But, well, the exact NAK, or National Qualification Agency in English, is a different story. Still, it underscores the importance of your energy agency. Thank you, dear colleagues. Indeed, the matters we discussed today are of paramount importance for everyone. We do understand that we have been living in wartime conditions for nearly 2 years, and this has affected all facets of our life. We have lots of damage, and problems are still, unfortunately, to mount further on for some period. And this is a big question, how we have to support the country, its economy, and primarily human capital we have. Speaking of professionals, skilled workers, we primarily mean knowledge, skills, competencies. The things that are even more important and needed today for the already vulnerable labor market here. I think everyone will agree that the state has to get support already now. The time is up. A lot has been done, though, and yet in conditions when many companies and enterprises are in ruins, with many people left without jobs, with documents lost, this is a challenging situation. The legislation provides for opportunities of recognizing job qualification. Wearing the hat of my agency, it's about qualification centers that I mean. These are that provide training opportunities, and they are able to recognize or grant qualification also based on training and education gained abroad. This results in a certificate from the qualification center, and this opens an opportunity of landing a job for certificate owner. And this will help saturating the labor market with skilled workforce. And respectfully, any willing individual may address such qualification center requesting his or her qualification confirmed and appraised by the center, provided, well, definitely that qualification is mentioned in the occupations register. And this will definitely open employment opportunities for such a person. The whole mechanism of qualification center operation is relatively new and fresh because the whole system kick-started to existence in late 2022. But still, we already see that this is a very efficient mechanism of allowing people into the labor market. The qualifications registry we have already mentions 42 qualification centers across Ukraine that already work recognizing qualifications. 155 occupational qualifications in total, and in 2 years nearly of efficient work of qualification centers, around 1,600 such certificates have been already issued. Not the freshest data. We are going to receive some updated statistics in a matter of days, but the number 1,600 of the certificates already is a solid key that these persons are employable or are already employed. So everyone with interest in relevant standards and how qualification centers operate can address them, and our agency is ready to provide methodological support for further qualification standards development, and is ready to advise on any matter pertinent to that. Ready for cooperation. Thank you so much, and your forecast for the coming days at least, speaking of economic and labor weather here, is very nice to hear. And let us hear from Deputy Director of the State Employment Service, Denis Olejnik. Thank you. From the outset, I'd like to thank GIZ for their cooperation and support since 2021. Thanks to support from the GIZ, we were able to train about 50 pedagogical personnel for our centers. We got support also in kind. In terms of IT and other equipment, we were able to train about 200 hours staff members in 2022. We are getting regular shipments of our IT equipment, notebooks, etc., including some dedicated equipment for our training centers, included welding stations, car repair shop equipment, even drones and agricultural equipment. Too many lines to mention all of them here. But again, this helps us adapting to current challenges, and we are doing our best to transform our service in line with today's requirements. As Roman from Ministry for Economy mentioned it, we have a range of national programs like micro grants, 250,000 hryvnias, vouchers for training for war veterans, about 20,000 of such vouchers already distributed. We don't understand the situation on the labor market. We see that up to 70% of unemployed are women listed and registered with our service. We have officially 104,000 unemployed in total. But we are changing our technologies. We are trying to face more the employers. We try to send only motivated people to them based on their request, because we think that only motivated people perform the best. Our vet centers provide training to more than 12,000. About 8,000 of unemployed underwent training at employers. And we do understand that when our veterans, male, female, return from the front line, they will need both support and retraining, and employment service will need to help them in terms of their social adaptation, in terms of helping them to find a job, to make them really adapted and ready for peaceful recovery of the nation. Thank you, Denise. I have no doubt that the rehabilitation and the veterans will be in the speech by Natalia Zaritska, but unlike government structure representatives, let us give a hear to the head of the SEDAS Independent Non-Partisan Center, Ivan Verbitsky. Yeah, thank you. We are working on development projects of all levels, regional, national. And speaking of why we need skilled workforce, I would name dignity, the intention of a person to feel dignity, to be able to tell everyone and himself or herself that, yes, I'm employed, I'm looking after my own life, and can provide decent life to myself and my family. We also do know that 71% of those living in Ukraine are ready to change their job. And I think one of the tasks of the project is to provide these people to do just that, reskilling them, retraining them, providing them with required training. Let me focus on some important things now. The first one, which concerns the system for collecting data and indicators. It's very important for the vet system, for the overall employment policy implemented by the government, for the operation of the National Employment Service. And this leads to further refinement and improvement of data we collect, to have better knowledge of why people opt or do not opt for vet in Ukraine, how people build their careers, how their views and expectations of the vets change. This will affect our further interventions and such similar projects in the future. Another matter to mention is gender equality, because vocational education and training is exactly a piece of education where the least gender balance can be seen, and this can and should be addressed by relevant public policy, starting from schools, that is before people go for vet schools. This needs to be worked on. We need to see how the vocational education and training system operated for the past years. Some of the recent years sent many of us on distance training, and that was even enhanced with the advent of the full-scale invasion. The question is whether people lose some of their skills working remotely or training remotely, and how fit they will be to the labor market requirements when they come offline. Next is the question of psychological assistance and counseling. This is what the topic that is widely discussed and used in practically every institution. Again, in that, it's very important to see people are able to get this counseling, and such education should be barrier-free to make it equal and to get rid of one of the challenges that we are going to surely face in the country.
When we are thinking how the state should address the unemployment and employment problems, we immediately realize that we have a wide spectrum of good programs to address that, but we need more focus on training and retraining, especially vocational retraining. You mentioned the vouchers program, and I believe this is quite useful, which will allow people to get access to a short-term retraining programs to get new skills, to find decent jobs, and the economy of the country will grow because labor market will be satisfied with the labor market demand will be satisfied. Thank you. Dear colleagues, if some of you believe that what was mentioned by Ivan Verbitsky said something not fully, I would advise you a website of the Center CEDAS where you will find more information, and eventually I'm happy to give the floor to Ms. Natalia Zaritska, who is not just the head of the NGO Steel Woman, she is also heart of this organization. Thank you, Andrei, for this presentation. First, I met Andrei in The Hague, where Andrei was a moderator of our discussion about kidnapped and prisoners of war in this war. I'm a wife of Ukrainian servicemen who fought in many frontline hotspots, including Azovstal, and from September when he was liberated from the liberated as a prisoner of war, and then he retired from the military service and immediately became a jobless person. Do you have an experience of shooting from the firearms? And you know there's a back shock when you make a shoot from the firearm, and we expect to get such a back shock after the war, when hundreds of thousands of the war veterans will come back to peaceful life. This thing was experienced in the United States when 90% of civilian population, having seen homeless people in the street, they suppose these were former war veterans. So let us imagine the war veterans who will come back from the front line. These will be people who had seen death, who had been shooting for years and years, who had been under stress, who had been either wounded or imprisoned as war prisoners, and just imagine that these people will come back home. And actually, we should realize that rehabilitation could not take place within 2 weeks in a hospital ward with another 8 war veterans in the same room. We should be able to offer a proper rehabilitation for these people. Then keeping in mind that there will be huge demand for the new army to carry out the recovery tasks in the country. But a human being is not a machine, and you can just switch a switcher from shooting in the army into the new labor duties. And for many war veterans, it is difficult to accommodate themselves to the conditions of peaceful work in a company, not to imagine how they will stay at the desks in the classrooms. Just imagine those potential conflicts which may sparkle out in classrooms, where you will bring together for retraining the war veterans and people from the former occupied territories, and, or those who rejected to go to the front line. And this is potentially dangerous situation. So that's why I'm very grateful to GIZ who is supporting such projects. Addressing the realities of today's Ukrainian bureaucracy in creating the register of the war veterans, that war veterans have to prove their history, have to overcome all the cumbersome bureaucratic stages confirming the status of the war veteran. Who are war veterans? These are people who are either in at the hospital beds, or they are in the ditches at the front line, in the trenches in the front line. So these are either combatants or very psychologically and physically vulnerable people, and you have to train them. Now let us more closely look at the barrier-free approach. So imagine this handicapped person who has psychological and physical wounds, and who can get access to the educational services. And I quite often recollect a phrase from the Schindler's List: you cannot rescue the whole world, but you can rescue some people. And doing that, we have to provide opportunity for education for some of those people. Impossible to rescue the whole world is, I think, not true. Those people who survived in the Holocaust, they have a good proverb: rescuing one person, you rescue the whole world. And actually, you have heard today how Natalia Zaritska and tens of thousands, hundreds of 100,000 family members of combatants. They survive through this reality of the war. And now I plan to ask first Ms. Shumik and then Mr. Poklonsky to comment on what you have heard. And the audience also is invited to get ready to post questions. It was my privilege that back in 2014 I worked in the Dnipropetrovsk regional administration when we faced the first former ATO veterans who came back from the front line. And I fully agree that you won't be able to rescue all of them, but you will be able to help at least some of them. And those vulnerable groups, those members of vulnerable groups, they will need not just services, they will need more awareness what will be available for them, because those who will be more aware, they will be able to get 2-3 services of the kind, for example, sanitary services, health recovery services, 2-3 times a year. While less aware about this possibility would get no one. And the same is true about educational and services and vocational training. Moreover, in the modern world, you may expect to see totally unexpected changes and negative changes every day. And this suggests we have to be flexible, and we have to be friendly to the veterans, friendly to all the people with special needs. And this is not easy, just as we have not been prepared for the needs in rehabilitation, as Natalia described. We are equally not prepared to get a huge wave of the former war veterans. I also had such experience when we accepted children from the occupied territories who were brought into Ukrainian territory, and in the same summer camp we had children whose parents were combatants from Ukrainian side at the front line, and those children, those two groups of children, they had internal conflict between them. One kept saying that that's due to your parents, that our parents have to fight at the front line, while another children kept saying, we came from the occupied territories and we want to be integrated into Ukraine. This suggests that all the programs for veterans will not be just properly or nicely organized programs, but they will have a lot of nuances. A good example from the Dnipropetrovsk region, once again. One of our training centers was at some distance from the transport and logistics, and one of the war veterans who had to cover this distance, and it was a problem for them. He had to protest against that, and this suggests that in future we may have a lot of such cases. Thank you, Irina. And now the floor goes to Roman, while I remind that those watching us on Facebook or on YouTube may write your questions to us. The Ministry of Economy formulates policy in the employment area, and all the neighboring issues around employment are also in focus of our attention. Yesterday we had a meeting with our foreign partners, and those foreign partners were a bit surprised that in Ukraine the functions of central executive body, which had to deal with the issues and problems of veterans, those functions are split between multiple central executive bodies. And as for the Ministry of Economy, we cooperate with several veteran organizations, and together with these partnerships, we try to amend and change effective legislation and simplify for the war veterans their integration into peaceful life. And there is a huge spectrum of issues, the healthcare issues, educational issues, employment issues, and the Ministry of Economy also has its documents regulating the required level of knowledge in the labor safety and security areas, in sufficiency of vocational training, and we try to tackle these issues and address them properly. Of course, there is a huge spectrum of issues which you mentioned, but this elephant has to be eaten piece by piece, and we have to start doing something one by one. Natalia has a comment. You are right, Vice Prime Minister, on reintegration calls for the advisory council, but some ministries they create obstacles for this work. But I would like to refer to the President's decree number 576, which establishes a new procedure for annual revision of the status of handicapped person for the purposes of military service. That is, you won't be able to plan your training for longer than 1 year, and we expect that we will have a divided society. Those who escaped abroad will be against those who stayed here. Those who would be at the front line would be against those who stayed in the rear. And moreover, a big issue will be the level of earnings of those who now fight at the front line because they earn much.
But then the retired servicemen say that that's too monotonous and too small the salary is for me to engage there. Yeah, thank you. And we have a question from the floor. You just present yourself. Yeah, was about to. Rodion Kalishko Institute of Professional Qualifications, and I have a question to Anna Reznik. The statistics is impressive. 42 centers, 150 occupations, 1,600 certificates already issued, but there was a phrase about them being like employed, to say that the issuance of a certificate equals employment. Do you have any system to monitor that in real life, in place? And have you heard of any issues or problems reported in the area? Thank you for the question. When I spoke, I focused on the fact that the certificate issued by the center is clearly a permit to work, and from here a person can be employed. Our communication with qualification centers based on their monthly reports and the number of certificates involved. This communication effectively allows us concluding that there is a demand for that, and that people addressing qualification centers are furthermore able to become employed. Yeah, thank you. Any more questions from the floor? Yeah, from this gentleman, please. And I have at least one question to Natalia Verbitska afterwards. Yeah, Alexander Shofaluk. Last year, we participated in GIZ-based projects on the job training. And my question probably will beg commentary from Irina Shumik. You have deep respect in the sector, I'd like to tell you, but I'd still like to focus on certain range of issues and hear your opinion on that. You know, we had a number of successful projects last year, among them some by GIZ. We have projects implemented by the USAID and other such organizations. And it appears, it looks as if every time they start from scratch, off the bat, there has been mentioned several times today the need to scale up the deliverables, the outputs. Question is how the ministries of education and science, of economy are involved to ensure that project results are rolled out, not to be able to have to start from scratch every time. Yeah, thank you for your question. Actually, we would be glad to report many of such projects, not so many of them in reality. We had a very successful project within Youth Skills on on-the-job training. We started a range of short-term trainings jointly with UNDP and USAID. And these are really short-term ones, specifically meant for IDPs and those who were relieved from the military service veterans. So not a secret formula there, quite a standard one rather, when projects liaise with employers to design based on that some training program and to invite and enrolled people willing to go on. So this does not bring 100% employment, but this is okay because people may move elsewhere with their newly acquired skills to search for better opportunities. As regards experience exchange, we always share gladly the information with new upcoming projects. I myself do not like to be in a situation when everything has to restart from scratch. But actually, this brings me to a good idea. Your comment. Should we arrange a round table to share experiences we've got and collected so far? Thank you, Irina. Any other question from the floor? If not, my question is to you, Natalie. You've mentioned that men in your speech, but meanwhile we have female veterans, and there will be more of both sexes there. You mentioned men among the servicemen, and there was also mention of gender equality aspect by Ivan Verbetsky. So yes, we have women on the front line. Some of them become heavily wounded. Take Adriana Susak. She was the chair of the veteran movement. She was really heavily wounded, and volunteers had to look for opportunities to bring her back to life, indeed. So really this begs separate approach to women who suffered from the war on the front line. Also to add here, employers should not be afraid of veterans. For sure, there are and there will be some nuances, some issues, but these are and can be overcome. In exchange, you are going to get a professional with deeply trained intuition, with lightning fast reactions, with ability to perform. These guys are able to feel air raid alerts coming, really half an hour in advance to the siren. So we can only imagine that a girl, a woman, instructed by nature how to deliver, to be a mother, to keep the family. I think there will be many more strong points to discover. Just a quick remark on women, not just veteran female soldiers, but also just women in regions. There is a widespread situation across oblasts with many men mobilized to the army and local companies, enterprises feeling shortage of labor. And this has compelled us to advertise some previously traditionally men's professions for women. There's a company in Mykolaiv Oblast that has announced tractor driving training courses for girls. Traditionally, it was only offered for men. So one of the outcomes of this war. Thank you, Irina. And our time for this panel discussion is drawing to its end. Because we are going to move on, and we have 2 minutes before we hear from one of our other participants, all the way from Latvia. It's time for you to mention some most memorable words in this discussion. Each of you will have 30 seconds for that. And we'll start with Ivan Verbetsky. The time in Europe after wars, the Second World War, the second one, created an impetus of policies to fight unemployment. Sometimes nations had no other option than to devise things that are obvious for us now, like unemployment benefits, employment services, and so on. We will be in the same situation where we will have to look for innovative options to deal with the challenges we are facing. And a key word is care. We spoke about initiative, Thank you. Your 30 seconds is up. Denis Alinik next. Just to remark on Natalia's remark, we at the Employment Service clearly understand the situation that we have with veterans. We are being addressed, and we do understand that our staff have to be quite flexible when providing services. We already have a program of grant support of veterans. We have already about 300 applications for such grants from veterans willing to start their business. Thank you, Denis. Roman Poklonsky. The work can be a savior. To get work, to get employed, one has to get trained. So let's train, let's develop, and let's not stay in blues. Hanna Resnik. I think the recovery was the most buzzword today, and it does require various components. From what we've heard so far today, we definitely have to unite for the common goal. Each of us having his or her own vision of how problems have to be solved. So to come to the common denominator, we have to meet regularly to discuss problems and ways of resolving them. Thank you, Irina. Maybe not so prominent, but I like the word challenge. I don't like the word problem or issue. I'd like challenge. To cite from Petro, again citing Mr. Koval, head of the Rivne Oblast administration. Busy hands are never idle. Natalia Verbetska. I checked with my husband this morning, telling him I'm going to this very important event. And he said, you're going to speak about the public policy and attitude towards servicemen. Please tell them that special people have to be approached in such a way that they no longer feel they're so special. Thank you. Which draws the line under this panel discussion, and you're free to now go back to your places in the room. There will be discussion on that during the recess, after the event. The main thing is that we've kicked off this work. So the action is going on, and we do feel how important international cooperation is. Still more that this project is funded and supported by Germany and the GIZ. Let us hear from Ilse Buligina, head of the department at the Ministry of Education of Latvia. And she will tell about her experience and how Latvia sees Ukraine.
Is yours. We're all ears.
Good morning, dear colleagues. I'm very honored and pleased to have been invited to speak to this respectable audience. Thank you very much. Just a small correction. I'm not head of department, I'm senior expert, but nevertheless, I have quite a long experience working at the Ministry of Education and Science of Latvia, also before the time when Latvia exceeded EU. And also now, and apart from this, I have another role. I'm also a researcher at the University of Latvia, dealing particularly with vet research. And besides, I'm also a member of several EU working groups regarding vet and also advisory committee on vet. And in 2020-21, I had the happy chance to work together with Ukrainian colleagues regarding their vet reform, especially the qualification framework. And despite the quite critical remarks of the Vice Minister saying that there's a work to do still, I really was very positively impressed about the work done so far in Ukraine. From what we could follow in this work, I can say that Ukraine is really going almost hand in hand with the EU reforms and developments in that. And therefore, I'm not here to advise you on how to proceed. Rather, I'm here to share my experience, how we were moving after exceeding EU and how our VET reforms are going. And maybe a couple of good examples which you may find useful. So we had accession to EU in 2004, and immediately we were able to start using the privilege of the European structural funds, and namely European Development, Regional Development Fund for Infrastructure and Equipment, and European Social Fund for Human Capital Development. As to the European Regional Development Fund, immediately at that time I was head of the EU Structural Funds unit, and I could closely follow all the processes. We started planning our school reconstruction in 2004, and only now I can say almost 20 years have passed. Our old schools have been reconstructed, very well equipped, and we are very, very proud about our modern vet schools, which are even more popular in some cases than general education schools, because you know it's a big challenge in all Europe to have a prestige of vet schools. As to the European Social Fund, we started our vet content reform, and it has direct link to what today colleagues were speaking about, how to get competent people to the labor market fast, and also how to make their skills compatible with the labor market needs and developments. And I will come back to the reform shortly afterwards about the content, but the main issue of the reform was to have a shift to competence-based approach, which has direct links to the micro qualifications or credentials, as one of the honorable speakers was mentioning today. Because in that flexible way, you can address the labor market challenges in a most effective way. To finalize our reform of content, which again took more than 10 years, just last year we had our amendments to the VET law. The amendments by themselves are 19 pages, the amendments themselves, where we have included everything of the reform of VET content of 10 years, modularization, micro-credentials, and everything making labor market very flexible, accessible for our students. I will not develop on this in greater detail because I have several more things I would like to say. Policy-wise, I think our strength is strong social dialogue. For example, at the very top level, we have the Employment Council, where the three relevant ministers of employment, education, and economy meet regularly, usually once a month, and they discuss all the relevant issues at a broader policy level, but we have all institutional mechanisms below that address these issues at every level practically. We are proud because our social dialogue is not on paper only, as it happens sometimes, but it's really in real life. Another important institutional formation is Adult Education Council, which at national level really addresses all the issues of adult education or labor market. And now our top priority is this individual learning accounts for every employed person, but we are still on the way of it. We are not finalized with it. As I said, key to our reform is this competence-based approach, which allows any person to enter the labor market with a minor qualification. And now our challenge is to do it in a digital way. Everything is being digitalized. And of course, we're quite proud about sector qualification frameworks, where every sector has been mapped mapped horizontally and vertically, and every person can see his or her career, starting from the lowest level EQF2 qualifications up to EQF7 qualifications. And it's done in close collaboration with our labor market partners. It's not education, it's really the meeting point for education and employment. But to move forward with my presentation, so our schools are really very, very modern, well equipped. We have very good content. So we are really happy and pleased if Ukrainian colleagues would like to organize some study visits. We can always in the ministry organize it. But I would like now to turn to one example, which is one of the priority of this project, and it's about vulnerable groups. And please allow me in the final part of my short intervention to deal with one particular project which we never expected would give such good results. The name of the project is PUMPURS. It's an acronym because the full name is something like preventing dropping out from vocational training programs of students from socially vulnerable groups. The acronym PUMPURS was created, I think, very wisely because in Latvian it means something like a bud, something which potentially can open up in a wonderful flower. This project started 5 years ago. It turns out we are almost the only ones in the European Union who have such national policy project. And it is extremely successful. It was even presented to the European Commission, and many, many countries got interested. What is the success of the project? But of course, we are not in such a vulnerable situation like Ukraine is now, but still in Latvia, there are many, many young people who are socially vulnerable. And this project did a wonderful job. It created a methodology how to address in every school in Latvia these young people, but not only these young people, but also the teachers. And there are two important things. First of all, they worked out a methodology, and based on interviews, they collected information what kinds of vulnerable students we have. And it turned out there are basically 4 big groups. For example, those who have material problems, those who have, let's say, maybe family, social problems, those who have gone through traumatic experience. There are 4 groups. And depending on this, they have developed a methodology how to address the problems or challenges of each of these groups. Secondly, there is a training for teachers and group mentors who are not teaching, but really day-to-day helping these students to address their problems any time of the day. And teachers are being updated and upgraded by special programs, and also based on particular cases, new programs are being developed or short courses. But more importantly, and really I would like to turn attention to this innovative experience. This project, in collaboration with Latvian Television, developed around 15 programs on television where it has been recorded on particular topic each. For example, living without parents, bullying at school, unhappy love even, which is a problem for young people, as you understand, which may prevent you from doing well. And then in these programs, young people with these experiences voluntarily allow them to be interviewed to speak about their problems. The teachers were also involved. And when these programs are shown on national television, first of all, the whole of the country sees it, and also afterwards at school, they are able to discuss it. And it is encouraging for young people because they see they are not alone, first of all. With their problems, they are maybe ashamed to talk about, or sometimes they are so stressed they can't talk about. And it's a wonderful therapeutic effect for these people, for these young people, to be able to not to drop out, for example, because of some psychological or personal problems. I will not go deeper, but you can have information about this project, and also the project team is open for discussions or for even a seminar, maybe, if you might be interested to share their experience. But I could say one more thing, which is maybe even more important. As a researcher, I got to know that the University of Latvia was doing research on this project, and they were interviewing not only these vulnerable students, of course, with their consent, and also the teachers' focus groups who are working with the students. And the results of this research and interviews was absolutely unexpected, because the aim of this project, the European Social Fund project, was really to prevent dropping out and kind of to help of those young people who are, in a sense, in brackets, inferior to regular vet students, and therefore we must help them so that they either become at least equal or not drop out. And the result of these interviews are absolutely unexpected to everybody. It turns out that very many of these vulnerable students are starting to do much better than the so-called regular students, meaning that this very successful project not only has prevented them from dropping out, but has made them high-reaching students. In the interviews, when you ask them, what help do you need more? They said, I have everything, no help is needed. Just everything depends on myself, and I have big aims in life. I want to become an entrepreneur. I want to have my own company, and similar answers. With this, I want to say that a targeted, well-thought policy regarding help to vulnerable students and their teachers and supporters may do wonders. If it could happen in Latvia in a situation where we were not under such situation as Ukraine is now, if it was very helpful. I believe maybe Ukraine can have some interesting experience for them, maybe to help them to address their students which are in a very, very vulnerable situation, as we understand. And in the end of my presentation or short intervention, I would like to thank you once again for inviting me, for the possibility to share and to express the opinion of our ministry colleagues that in case you find some Latvian experience interesting or useful, we are always open to share with our materials, our methodologies, and also ready to prepare some study visits and if some people in Ukraine might be interested. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Buligina. You were talking of very serious things, yet there was sometimes a smile in your voice and on your face. And for me, this is a sign of being assured that what you're talking about will materialize. We in Ukraine are grateful to the people of Latvia for your constant support and solidarity, and we'll try to do our best so that you smile again. This time,
thank you. Good luck.
This time about our successes. Take care. Дуже дякую, пані Булигіні. І зараз у нас
Thank you to Ms. Buligina, and now it's time to give the floor to Ms. Tetiana Bilecka, who is head of the reform support in the Ministry of Education and Science in Ukraine. I've received a signal that Tetiana is not via Zoom. Tetiana is present here physically. And what is the most important, that the audience is prepared to look in this direction. Thank you for this opportunity. Yesterday, I was asked by my colleagues, they have asked me what were the main challenges for me. I like this word, the challenges, which bears most positive and negative connotation at the same time. Since 2019, I've been working in a team of the reform support in the Ministry of Education and Science, and during all this period, I've been involved in the development of VT, education and cooperation with the international partners. And in my opinion, one of the challenges is mutual understanding and also the importance of being on the same page as to the priorities and the demanded mentality changes in the vocational training area. What I have learned under the war conditions, a lot of processes had considerably speeded up. For example, the understanding of the importance of VT training and retraining in the context of adult education had radically changed since the beginning of the full-scale war. Many approaches to VT had changed. And moreover, I would like to point to such a concept as inclusivity of education. In Ukraine, quite often we understand this, the inclusivity of vulnerable people, but of mostly handicapped people, but I believe that we should shift the emphasis from handicapped people to people from different marginal groups, from people under difficult life circumstances, for those who are IDPs, who are migrants to Europe, who are war veterans, etc. This, in my opinion, is quite important shift, which is important not only for Ukraine but for the European countries, because since the Second World War and after the Second World War, they have not been having such experience. For Western Europe, after since the First World War, that experience had been in existence. So from Germany point of view and Western European point of view, they are very much interested to retain Ukrainian migrants, to retrain them and to receive them as a new labor force. While for Ukraine, it is natural to bring back Ukrainian migrants back and retrain them. And even keeping in mind the future accession of Ukraine to EU, this poses new questions, new perspectives of the labor market. These are all the aspects that we should keep in mind discussing all the problems. Tatiana, I have two questions to you. We have heard much about inclusivity of education, but I haven't heard much about inclusivity of work or inclusivity of labor market. I believe this is directly connected to the inclusivity of vocational training. When you speak about vocational training, what do you mean? What was called in my Soviet childhood the professional training. Yes, you are right, but the demands in labor market change rapidly, and COVID and then war had demonstrated that quite brightly. And COVID revealed the need to tailor your skills up to the changing life situation as rapidly as possible. The war introduced even more sharp demand for that. And we have found out that you cannot learn the skills for the whole life, and you have to gain new skills. And I believe that we have learned a lot on this way. I'm not speaking about inclusivity of the labor market. I'm speaking about the result of the labor market, so to say, people who have who have gained new jobs. Then discussions about bringing Ukrainians back and formation of the labor force. But this is not migration from Ukraine, which is being often discussed. And we should take this into consideration. And despite the war, living conditions in Ukraine remain attractive for some people from Asia even now. I'm not an expert in that, but I have underwent training of the International Labour Organization in the area of labor migrants, and in result of that training course, I've understood better why some countries intentionally bring labor capital from other countries, from those countries where the conditions are worse. There is a classical example of Germany, which soon after the Second World War had opened doors to the labor migrants. And I believe that for Ukraine, this also will be a way out. And at the beginning of presentation, we had seen the figures, and we understood how much people we need. We have huge territory, and a lot of people are aging, and we will have a lot of disabled people, and this will be a challenge for education to recognize the education of migrants from Asian countries, and teaching in foreign language. And another aspect of inclusivity, another issues of inclusivity, do we need additional platforms to discuss these issues? Thank you, Tatiana. Tatiana is the head of the Reform Support Unit from the Ministry of Education and Science, and Mikhailo Lещенко from the German Embassy.
Damen and Herren, шановні пані та панове, пане Андрію.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear Andrei, Mr. Moderator, it's a great honor for me to be here and relay greetings from the German Embassy with wishes of good successes to the project in the shortest term. Germany has been supporting Ukraine since the beginning of independence, and the support of reforms of various facets of Ukrainian life started far before the start of the war, the full-scale invasion, the 2014 when the actual war of Russia against Ukraine started. As of today, Germany has been among the biggest donors and countries providing Ukraine with political support. For all this time, the Deutsche Gesellschaft for Internationale Zusammenarbeit has grown to become a well-recognized tool of such cooperation in and with Ukraine, with a huge experience under its belt. And the GZ was able to earn trust and report from the Ukrainian government, from Ukrainian companies and business persons, from the public. So now we do know them as just GZ, which tells that everyone knows this very important tool of German technical assistance to Ukraine. We all know that bureaucratic procedures take time, but in this case, it's amazing how fast and experienced GZ efforts have been to prepare the project together with Ukrainian counterparts. From what the project management told me, we are to get some first results by the end of this year to report, and most part of the budget of the project has to be spent as soon as efficiently possible. This is a big breakthrough for German-based projects with an average lifespan of 3 to 4 years. Now, Andrei, you asked about which Ukrainian proverb might come into people's mind. Roughly translated, the Ukrainian proverb is, the old guy never crosses himself until he hears the thunder from the skies. And probably this can relate to the fundamental changes that happened in Germany, also in terms of assistance to Ukraine, in terms of security consideration, and the fact that GZ was lighting fast in reacting to the changing needs in Ukraine, also in the area of vocational education and training. It shows how things can quickly change. It's really a challenge to be the last to speak because everyone practically mentioned everything, and on the other hand, he or she still wants to reflect and say something important. Let me try it. So the technological advancement in the past decades led to new occupations, new jobs, new markets, and businesses emerge. And this has been the driver of development for most European countries, compelling them to start with the lifelong learning. The relevant experience in the European countries, in the G7 country, has been accumulated in the past decade or so. The need for such education was there even before the country, and Ukraine is a modern country, an economic developed economy, and you can see how advanced we are. You can check your iPhones, you can see the penetration of digital technologies here, and sometimes Ukraine goes ahead with its processes compared with many countries, including Germany itself. Then the lightning that struck, it happened back in 22, which underscored the needs of lifelong learning, the need to involve IDPs on the labor market, on the regional labor market, to react to the changes. And this will be among the focal points of this project. I'm sure that the project will be a boon, not just for Ukrainian, but also for German and European professionals, with lots to learn. There, the drivers mostly are dictated by technological process. And here the driver is the crisis situation. Judging from the predecessor EU for Skills project, the experience of dual education, when employers are involved in the vocational education and training, Germany has this experience, a vast one. It will be very instrumental for use in Ukraine. And from what I heard, this experience will be further explored and learned throughout this project. Lastly, I'd like to outline this very important cooperation between the two Ukrainian ministries, the one of economy, the one of education and science. I can tell you that it's not that easy also in Germany to get a couple of ministries together over one project. And we have here a bunch of problems in Ukraine, ranging from IDPs to the need to cater for the needs of military servicemen, people from vulnerable group, and definitely this begs attention of the Ministry for Reintegration, the Ministry for Veterans Affairs. Still more that the previous speakers mentioned the importance of looking into destinies of war veterans, and definitely this goes beyond the domain and scope of responsibility of just one or even a couple of ministries. So there are things to learn from Germans, from German professionals, and there are things that Ukrainian peers can teach their overseas peers as well. Last but not the least, it's a matter of having Ukrainians return to their home country. I'd like to offer a broader look of it. We need to see Ukrainians return back to professionals' lives. Just take the example of academic research. Many researchers cannot continue with their research because of damage to infrastructure, because some of them leaving for abroad. And by the way, not everyone of them was able to find employment opportunity there. Some sit on welfare, others have been happy to find some other job not related to research. Meanwhile, this means that this leads to a situation when such potential is being simply lost to the country. And this is brain bust, not just brain drain. So the matter of bringing people back to their professional lives really matters, and this project that offers new opportunities of qualifications of grade, requalification, also for the adults with previous education experience. Who knows, maybe they have secondary or higher education or even doctoral degree under their belt. So again, this is about allowing people going back to productive life. So just coming back to your question of what we found as keywords for that for this kickoff meeting. So it's a matter of rekindling the labor resource in Ukraine, bringing it back to the professional life. I think I made it just on time. Okay, thank you, Mihailo. And this exactly is the time when I have to ask Michael Paulo again to wrap up and draw the line with some final words. And I plead with you to be as instrumental and enticing as you were at the beginning.
In between you, I hope it's okay for you. Thank you for these intense 2 hours and of the discussion. I think we started to discuss labor market demands. We discussed about the demands towards the labor, vocational education and training system. We extensively discussed the needs to deal with vulnerable groups, and now we discussed a little bit the international outlook on what EU needs to do on its way to become EU member state. I only have 3 short messages to you. The first one is the project is kicked off. My team will work hard to start with the activities at latest on the 1st of November, and we are happy to work with both ministries together and with 20 VET training providers. I think the second point, Dmytro Zagorodny mentioned in his speech, the challenges are huge. International support is required. And I just would like to announce once more that we, as an implementer of the German government, are also ready for cooperation with other EU member states and with other countries. The third and last point is more a personal takeaway for me. Thank you, Natalia, for the points you mentioned about the ex-competence. I also recognized this need to deal with this group, particularly during my visits in Vinica and Poltava. We are trying our best to integrate the needs into our project activities. We will train teachers on how to deal with vulnerable groups. We will financially support the training in the next month to come up, and we will also train career counselors. But what I got out of the discussion is that there is so much more to do. It goes into medical sphere, orthopedics, medical treatment. It goes into the area of psychological support. And of course, we are an education and training program, and we are limiting ourselves and try to incorporate as much as possible. But we are also having a wider portfolio dealing, for example, with medical support and so on. And I would be in touch with other organizations and try to find linkages with them, because my feeling is it's a generational task, and it requires not only the cooperation between the different ministries and government agencies in Ukraine, but also a huge international effort to manage this integration of ex-combatants, but also of other vulnerable groups like IDPs. Thank you. I would like to invite you finally to the networking session. We have some lunch offered. Thank you once more, and we stay in touch. Thank you.
Дуже дякую.
Thank you so much, Mikhail. Thanks everyone for being here, for participating. I'd like also to thank Ruslan for having organized the video editing. I'd like to thank Andrei for a sound engineer. And at the end of it, I'd like to tell you the following. In both versions, skills for recovery mentioned without spaces in between. Or as they say in our Kyiv subway, gaps between them. And further you can see that there are also some words put together, written without needed spaces, which means there's no time to waste. Let's concentrate on what we are doing. Thank you. And speaking of Ukrainian proverbs, good luck.